Flashy waterfowls, worm one shot. Taylor was clinically depressed, she just never noticed it. Not until she finally got her power at any rate. That sent her from passive suicidal ideation to actively attempting suicide. Eventually, however, she calmed down, and decided that by hook or by crook, she would become a hero. It would be difficult, pretty much impossible considering her power, but she would try anyway. Her power was just so ridiculously sad. She was a tinker that specialized in breeding waterfowls. Breeding waterfowls. Not modifying, not enhancing, but breeding. It wasn't even breeding in general. That would have been awesome. No, she just had to get a power that specified waterfowls. Even controlling insects would have been better. At least with insects, she could spread disease and poison people. But nope. Birds that swim was what she got. And it wasn't even all waterfowls either. Just ducks and penguins. Fox food and orca food respectively. Geese and pelicans would have been an improvement. That's when she noticed something about her duck breeding. She couldn't modify them directly, but she could alter their hereditary genetics. It was extremely restrictive, with only 4 types available, but those 4 wound up powerful enough. 2 movers, 1 brute, and 1 brute mover. They weren't particularly powerful by Cape standards. At most a 2 on the PRT scale. But that was on their own. 1 brute 2 was easily taken down by a group of trained normals. But 100? 1,000? 10,000? And so Taylor decided to clean up Brockton Bay the old-fashioned way. Extreme application of violence. And thus she began preparing. The ducks needed food and training. Individually, they didn't need much. Even training only took 6 hours at maximum. An army, however, would require much more resources. Luckily for Taylor, the ducks had an uncanny ability to find gold nuggets wherever they went. That greatly eased the burden on her. After a month, she had secured the parts she needed to create a feeder, and found a half-decent abandoned warehouse near the docks for them to hide in. That's when their numbers really began to grow. From a dozen to 100 within the first month. From 100 to 1,000 in the second. Soon enough, the gangs took notice, and the ducks had to go to war. By nature, the ducks were extremely competitive. Racing was their favorite pastime after all. So Taylor took advantage of that nature and gave them something new to compete over, beating up gang members. They took to it disturbingly well. At first they fought individually. This resulted in several casualties on their end. But soon enough, they learned. The ducks began working together in teams of 4. A flyer, a swimmer, a runner, and a brute. They made up for each other's deficiencies. The flyers scouted, distracted, or baited targets into an ambush. The swimmers snuck around, spying on conversations or conducting sabotage on waterfront properties, usually arson. The runners alternated between being bait and ambushing unsuspecting gangbangers. The brutes, being strangely skilled in climbing, set up numerous traps around the city, or joined in on the ambushes and rabbit-punched people. It was still a competition to them, but team-based rather than individual. And that just made them all the more dangerous. Unfortunately, they were unable to effectively handle capes. Alabaster was just about the only one that they could handle, mostly because aside from his reset power, he was just a baseline human. Strong capes like Flufflewufff, Mush, and Oni Lee tore them to shreds. Then there was the fact that the PRT took exception to their very existence. After all, they were an unidentified biotinker's army. Slowly but surely, the ducks got pushed back, and Taylor began getting desperate. That's when she had a thought: what could penguins do? Unfortunately, she couldn't modify the penguins the same way she modified the ducks. However, there was something different about the penguins. They seemed smart. Sure, the ducks were too, but the penguins were almost human in their intelligence. This was offset by their innate bloodthirst and zealotry. Some crafted armor out of scrap metal, some tied balloons to their backs to fly, some built jetpacks, some put bed sheets over their heads to become intangible and borderline invisible. Most, however, simply charged forwards, shrugging off bombs and bullets, to tear at their foes. Out of that lot, a few were even more special. They may not have been as strong, but they were much smarter, which made them all the more dangerous. They looted guns, modified those guns, and truly went to war. Those Thinker penguins, despite not deserving of particularly high ratings by PRT standards, had an unholy synergy between their powers. Extremely skilled marksmanship, paired with the ability to greatly improve conventional firearms by more than triple their original specifications, was a dangerous combination indeed. Add in the uncanny ability to pick out perfect sniper nests and engineer penguins which were ridiculously good at fortifying those nests. Suffice to say, Coil's mercenaries got to understand how truly outclassed they were. Explain to me again how your team was wiped out by a group of penguins. With all due respect, sir, get that stick of your body so your thing stops spewing out the wrong end of your digestive tract. Those penguins are highly skilled commandos armed with Tinker Tech version of conventional firearms. They have perfect accuracy, pick out the perfect perches, and lay down more fire than should be physically possible. They have grenade launchers and chain guns enhanced to the point of being meant to be used against tanks instead of people. In the other timeline, Coil was hearing the same thing said with slightly different words. The penguins were a real problem. Though perhaps if he could control their creator they would be a useful asset. But somehow, the most dangerous of the penguins, were the most peaceful ones. Those ones simply desired to fly. And to achieve that, they would do whatever they had to. Those penguins deserved a Tinker rating more than Taylor. Frankly, it made her extremely self-conscious to be an inferior Tinker to her own creations, which just so happened to be literally bird-brained. Well, birds were actually extremely smart animals. But these birds, they built nuclear reactors. Nuclear reactors built to explode. Thankfully, they somehow managed to redirect all that explosive upwards for their space program. In related news, the penguins had a better space program than the rest of the world, and Simurgh was actively avoiding penguin airspace. She was actually allowing whatever the penguins built to leave orbit. With the advent of numerous nuclear explosions on U.S. soil, the military began to intervene. And thus Taylor had inadvertently gone to war with the United States of America. When the military began shooting down penguin-made flying devices, it flipped a switch in those peaceful flightless birds. They began to retaliate with a disproportionate amount of force. The formerly peaceful penguins, quote, declared war on the dodos, and began unleashing nuclear Armageddon. The sole saving grace was that they also knew how to handle nuclear fallout. So while several areas were set on fire, glassed, reduced to rubble, and or uncreated, those places were habitable again in a matter of days. The world's first end-class threat was declared. More dangerous and more destructive than even the Endbringers. At least Endbringers had a downtime and could be driven off. But the ducks and penguins? Their numbers and technology grew exponentially each day. If left unchecked, humanity would be driven extinct. So humanity began to prepare for a war wherein the fate of the world hung in the balance. North America was evacuated while everyone else began pooling their resources to storm the budding bird empire. Even Cauldron had shown themselves to assist with the evacuation, though their main goal was to convince the penguins to attack Sion. It was then, during that brief lull in violence, that something truly unthinkable happened. The penguins had accidentally succeeded where string theory had failed. They blew up the moon. To celebrate their space program restarting, the penguins decided to launch a rocket as far and fast as they could. They neglected to account for the existence of the moon. The Omega shuttle, equipped with Omega rockets and Omega boosters, launched by the Omega coil, blew apart the moon and continued flying onwards. While it wouldn't affect the Earth too much in the short term, the destruction of the moon had sent a message to the humans: give up. To this day, Taylor a Bear is still revered as a god. While not as flashy deities the humans worshipped, the girl certainly deserves her role. After all, she is our creator. Class dismissed. Next lesson we'll be talking about our interactions with humans on different worlds. Thank for watching.